You're listening to a Frequency Podcast Network production.
So this is weird, but we got a voicemail from a voice that you'll probably recognize.
Hey, Jordan. It's Jordan here. Calling to ask you to get your ass in gear and use your new podcast to look after your own money problems. You should probably start with your subscription habit. My dude, I'm just scrolling through your PayPal account right here. You've got $3.39 to an indie podcast you subscribe to, $18.07 to the Toronto Star, $4.52 to the New York Times, $12.60 US to the Washington Post, $21 to Microsoft, that's for an Xbox subscription, $16.94 to Disney Plus, $16.94 to Spotify. That is just on PayPal. There's more on the credit card. There's some that come directly out of your bank account. You haven't met a streaming service you haven't signed up for. You believe in supporting the news media. So guess what? You subscribe to a lot of newspapers and video games and podcasts and, independent media. That too. There's Defector and the Narwhal. And you subscribe to a couple of your friends' Substacks because you've had them on the show and you thought it would only be fair to pay them for their work personally. I know that you have never, ever actually gone through a month of your subscriptions and totaled up how much you're spending. But I bet if you did, all of a sudden, it would make a lot more sense why you don't actually have as much money as you think you do. And so you got this brand new show. You're using it to solve other people's money problems. Why not yours? Come on, dude. Get it together. Otherwise, you're just being a hypocrite. Go solve our problem. Thanks. I'll hang up and listen.
Yep, that's me. You're probably wondering how I found myself in this situation. I'm Jordan Heath Rawlings, and you're listening to In This Economy, the show where we help you understand the systems that create the money problems we find ourselves in, including me, from grocery bills to mortgage renewals to out-of-control lists of subscriptions that show up on your bank statement, your credit card statement, your PayPal statement, and everywhere you look. In each episode, I talk to a listener. In this case, that listener is me, who is facing a financial challenge. And then I talk to an expert who can explain the factors causing that problem and how the whole situation came to be. And finally, we try to find solutions. They might not be perfect solutions, they might not solve everything, but they will make a difference in your wallet, and they'll help you plan for the future, even in this economy. Our caller today, as I mentioned, is me, and as you heard, I've got a big problem with subscriptions. I really don't think I'm the only one. So I decided to call up Barry Hertz for some insight into how this got so out of control. Barry is the deputy arts editor and film editor at the Globe and Mail. Barry, I remember the day that I subscribed to Netflix and it was like a revelation, and I added it up today, and I am subscribed to 6 separate video streaming services. And I include sports in that, but that's a lot. And they now cost me a little over $100 a month. I guess my big opening question is how did we get from Netflix $8.99 to 6 streaming services $100-something a month?
This is a great question. I think this is the question that the streaming services definitely do not want to answer for you. Because this was the promise of the great streaming revolution, right? You could decide what you want, when you want, how you want, and you could leave the cable bundle behind. But basically, this is what happens when great promises come crashing down and meet reality. There can only be so many competition before things get fragmented. And I think, subscribers are starting to, if they haven't already, given really hard looks at their monthly bills and seeing where all that money is going And they're going to be making some tough choices. And we're going to see some streaming services disappear entirely because of those choices. That's kind of how it's going to end up happening. And it's funny, you never think that technology is cyclical, but certainly business strategies in the technological sector are cyclical. And we're back to just where we started with that cable bundle and people feeling that their choices have been ripped away from them and that they need to make some interesting cost-saving decisions.
I'm really interested in talking about how we've come full circle, but also, first of all, I'm just fascinated by Netflix because for so long it seemed like it was going to be the one, right? It was going to be the one that you would need outside of cable TV, and off we go. How did it lose its market share? Is it still dominant? And where did all these other ones come from?
I would say that Netflix is still the one, and that it will come out of this current era being the one. They kind of invented the model. They invented the medium, really, of what we think of when we think of streaming. You know, they started off as a DVD mailing service when that was kind of a novel and unique alternative to going down to the local video store or library and actually renting a title by title. And then they took that idea of convenience and they kind of put it on steroids and started to pump the titles directly through your internet service provider. So now you could watch whatever you wanted, well, whatever you wanted with a giant asterisk, because whether it was in Netflix's rotating volume of catalog or not, but you could watch certain programs on your phone, on your television, smart television, on your desktop computer, your laptop computer, wherever you really were with a screen. They created that on-demand kind of era, and they were very successful at it. And they were successful at showing you content from other studios' libraries, as well as when they started commissioning original series. Orange is the New Black, House of Cards being the two most innovative examples at the very beginning. So now, not only were you going to Netflix because you wanted to watch a movie that you maybe missed in theaters or that you don't want to wait around for television to do or you don't want to go to the video store for, but you wanted to see a series that was only available at this one platform. So you had to become a subscriber. And thus we had the subscription boom and how everything is now, you know, in the streaming era, everything is subscribe or die is basically the mantra of how that business evolved. And the initial part, the great promise of it was advertising free, right? You don't have to sit through ads anymore while watching network television. It was basically taking the great prestige of HBO, which was ad-free as well, uncut material, original stuff, and making it anytime, anywhere. You didn't have to have a very expensive cable package to access it. It was actually quite affordable. You know, in the initial run, Netflix plan would run you at the very basic, maybe $9, $10 a month. So that's like what, 1.5 movie rentals at that time? Who wouldn't sign up? It was a great deal. Something like that. It was a great deal. Now, it was such a great idea that everybody else thought, well, we should do that too. And why aren't we doing that? And why are we giving our movies to another service for a relatively low licensing fee when we could create our own giant streaming service and rake in all the profits by getting all our subscribers over there? And so then you had the kind of expansion of the streaming world, and you had HBO Go, HBO now Max, which has turned into just Max. You had Amazon getting into the business with Prime Video. You have Disney getting into it with Disney Plus. You have Paramount getting into it with Paramount Plus. You have Hulu in the States. You have Crave in Canada. You have the Criterion Channel. You have Mubi. You have all these different services that are competing for what is not an unlimited pool of eyeballs.
Right.
The kind of great arms race that was involved in the streaming war was kind of assuming that there were all these vast untapped markets, not just in North America, but in the world. And if a streaming service could get those markets and turn them into loyal subscribers and loyal customers, then they could, you know, succeed and be world conquerors. But really, there is a ceiling to that, as all the streamers discovered. But in the meantime, the pandemic came along. The theatrical market, which was always in some sort of trouble, certainly with Netflix on the ascension, crashed down to complete standstill with the restrictions that the pandemic brought on. And then it was just a free-for-all when it came to streaming. Every studio was now investing in their own streaming service. Even though, if you kind of stop to think about it for just 2 seconds, you were killing one business that has been proven to be a reliable profit center for a century, and doing so at the expense of this wild, new, unpredictable market, which was streaming, which was very new, which had a lot of question marks around it, and also had a big, huge, fat competitor in Netflix that had led the charge for a decade plus prior. And now we're out of the pandemic mostly. Certainly the theatrical restrictions are over, and everybody's looking around and saying, wow, what happened? I guess we kind of killed the theatrical market to feed the streamer market, but that didn't really work because Netflix is still the leader and our streamers have yet to turn a profit. In fact, we're still pouring millions, sometimes billions worth of bad money into these things, as you'll see with a place like Peacock.
Well, that was going to be my next question, which is, aside from Netflix, you mentioned the goal is to get a ton of eyeballs and start raking in money here. Who's raking in money? Are any of them raking in money aside from Netflix?
Well, depending on the kind of fuzzy math that you want to believe, Warner Brothers Discovery has turned a profit for the first time with their Max streaming portal. But that also doesn't really take into account the billions of dollars that they slashed out of their expenses and employees and content spends. So sure, it's starting to make some money, but it also has kind of conceded the fight as well, because as you'll see, a lot of HBO shows now, which are under the Warner Brothers Discovery umbrella and should theoretically only be available to stream on the Warner Brothers Discovery streamer, are now available on Netflix, because that's how they actually can make some money. So
they could have made that money in the first place.
They could have made that money in the first place, but why make easy, simple money when you can make really complicated, messy debt?
I could have just stayed subscribed to Netflix until the stuff I wanted showed up there instead of subscribing to HBO. The past few years during the pandemic have seen a ton of mergers of production companies or just brands, for lack of a better word, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe or whatever, being just outright purchased by other companies. How has this affected what's available where? And I mean, ultimately, the ability of the average person to understand what's happening right now in the market.
Yeah, I mean, I work in the industry, I cover it, and I should know exactly where things are playing and how to access them. And often I'm left totally confused. I cannot imagine the general audience being able to decipher all these different licensing and sub-licensing deals that go into what is playing where. And to know that the Marvel shows are part of the Disney universe, and to go there and know that, well, there are, other different Disney shows that weren't quite licensed there and they're available there and da-da-da-da-da. The discoverability element is a really confusing one. And it's a big problem that I think is kind of we're seeing wash out right now in people looking at their bills and saying, maybe I don't need this because maybe I don't ever watch anything on there. Maybe actually, though, on that service is everything you do want to watch, but it's just so plug deep down into the algorithmic queue of your homepage that you would never know anyways. We saw a big kind of peak of production to feed all these streaming services, really in 2022, early 2023, where production companies were just pumping out series after series, high profile, expensive series with celebrities and ostensibly well-known kind of intellectual property to boost the catalogs of all these disparate streaming services in order to gain that subscriber base. Then the strike came along, the financial realities of the market just kind of hit everybody all at once. And all those shows were either, canceled after one season, never even made it to the air, or just kind of really just sitting at the bottom of anyone's watch charts. And, it's a real reckoning, basically, not only in what's available now to the viewer, but what is being produced. And really, if you think about it, the promises, the great, fantastic, exciting promises of the streaming era, that we would have so much to watch all the time for so little money whenever we want.
Let's talk about one of the last parts of that, because this is a personal finance show. As I mentioned, Netflix used to be $9.99, I think, or less. I think the base package now is like $15 to $16.99 in Canada. The price of all of these, I looked into this, except Apple TV Plus, which is, I guess, a loss leader for the mega corporation, has risen over the past year. Some by a lot. Why are they doing that? And is it enough to save them, given the fractured universe they're trying to exist in?
I mean, why are they doing it? They're taking a look and they're like, we got to get some money into these things somehow, and we'll do it in whatever means possible. This is why advertising has been slowly introduced into almost all of the streaming services. Netflix has an ad tier now. Amazon Prime basically has made their ad tier the default tier. If you don't want to pay for the ads, then you got to go into it and do something extra. So there's a come to Jesus moment that's happening throughout. And Apple TV Plus, yes, while perhaps the most affordable and a loss leader for a tech giant that could buy all the streaming services and you and I and the entirety of Canada 100 times over, is only a loss leader so much until they realize, we don't want to do this anymore.
Right.
And they raised prices too, not by much, but by a little.
I missed that.
I think it was what was once $6.99 is now $7.99 a month.
I subscribe to so many, they just sneak $1 past me here and there.
Exactly, it's $1 here, $1 there. That's the philosophy. They'll think that there's a tolerance from the consumer about how much they'll be willing to pay extra, and eventually, those tolerances add up.
Isn't that what killed cable TV, and we've just made it again?
We have just made it again. But what is the alternative for the consumer right now? Nobody is going to go back, certainly, to cable TV. That is just not going to happen. So there is still the banking on the notion that, consumers have developed these habits, and we have, no argument here, made it easier to watch things wherever we want, whenever we want. So $1 of pain here, $2 more of pain there, that might be enough to kick it down the curb for just a little while longer, at least until some of these services start to merge and we see a wave of mergers and acquisitions and conglomeration in the streaming sector, which is, I think, inevitable.
That's the end game, right? I remember talking to a business analyst about the future of online gambling in Ontario and in Canada. When it first began, there were 30, 40 different online gambling companies. And he said, eventually the big fish eat the little fish, and there'll be 3 guys, and you'll use one of those 3 guys.
Right, exactly. And we're seeing it already. I mean, Paramount, one of the big remaining 5 Hollywood legacy studios, You can't go a headline these days without hearing about acquisition talks from them. So there's, and same with Warner Brothers Discovery. Everybody's saying that, it'll only be a number of days before they spin off some of that to perhaps, NBC Universal, Comcast. So there goes Peacock and there goes Hulu. And then Paramount Plus, is that just a kind of doorstop and as a shiny object for somebody to acquire and fold into their services? Maybe Apple will buy Disney, which has always kind of been the fan favorite theory around here. Sony is kind of a little bit of an outlier in that they have this huge, of course, electronics company behind them. And they never got into the streaming service game themselves, preferring to remain an arms dealer, basically, in which they sell their content to the highest bidder. And they have a very lucrative tier one window deal with Netflix in that their theatrical films, the first stop after the theater is Netflix.
Once there are only a few of these places left and the big fish have eaten all the little fish, that's when those prices get jacked again, right? Because there's nowhere else to go.
No, the prices will go down. Everything will be great and dandy. 99 cents fire sales all the time. Yeah, I mean, that's what it's going to be, right? With limited choice comes limited options. And, we'll find ourselves saying, hey, if we want to watch not only the new Marvel series or the new Disney series or the new episode of The Simpsons, but if we want to watch the new Mission Impossible film too, or if we want to watch the new Aliens movie, or if we want to watch the new Brad Pitt thriller, then we'll have to sign up for this thing. Right. It will be the only option left.
I'm glad that we're talking to you. First of all, thank you for explaining the future of the streaming wars and the dystopia that is inevitably coming. I knew that we would get there. But I also want to talk to you because, you write about film and TV. You're also the arts editor. So you care deeply about the arts. You probably consume a lot of them. This subscription model that artists, creators, authors, whatever, will take their product directly to the people and ask them to pay and sort of avoid the corporate-sponsored, ad-sponsored model, is incredibly popular right now. How many of those things do you subscribe to? Here I'm thinking of like Substacks, or maybe you subscribe to a video game service, or maybe you've got a subscription to the New York Times or the New York Times games because you like to play Connections on your phone, whatever. Like, think about that.
I don't want to think about that because it makes me sad.
I know.
It makes me sad and it makes me mad and it makes me worry what happens when my wife looks at my credit card statement. But a lot. I'm fortunately, for my sense of sanity and my wallet, not a gamer, just because I have 3 young children and I can barely figure out free time in that respect.
Fair enough. I will tell you one thing about the game streaming, though, is that the game streaming is actually where you just described streaming ending up, right? There's Microsoft and there's Sony and maybe Nintendo, and that's it. And the prices are now going way, way up because those are the only 3 places, if you want to stream video games, that's your option.
Sure. I mean, yeah. So it all makes sense. It all goes down to the funnel. And, as you said, like I'm a culture reporter, I'm a culture, which means I'm a culture consumer, a voracious one at that. So, I'm in a slightly different set of circumstances because I get a lot of stuff sent to me through kind of preview means. But I still like to be on top of things. So yeah, I don't know. I turn on my Apple TV homepage, every night and I see all the options in front of me. And as I'm sure many listeners here will do, they'll get panicky and not choose anything and then just, go and put their head in a pillow for a little bit until the sweet relief of sleep comes. But this is a problem where we're an overstimulated, overwhelmed, and oversubscribed consumer base right now.
What do you do in your own life? Do you consider this stuff in your own life? Do you sort of every once in a while go through your subscriptions and try to see what you have and cut some that you're not using? Are you ever surprised to see something still on there that you haven't used in months, etc.?
Oh yeah, and this kind of every time I look at the monthly bills, I was like, oh God, what am I do I even use that? I did. I will say, sorry, Crave, but I cut Crave. And I will only re-up it when there is a really good HBO series that I want to watch on a weekly basis. And this is a problem. This churn is a problem for the streamers, and that's partly why they're entering this era of belt tightening. In that, when you used to have a cable package, it was a whole to-do in order to get that canceled, right? You got to call the cable company. You have to deal with a representative there. They might even have to send somebody physically over to remove the box and blah, 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 blah. So you're like, forget it. I'll keep it. Okay. Now with all these streaming services, I mean, you can do it at the touch of a button through your phone or through, your web browser. And then there's no penalty for doing so. And there's certainly no penalty for signing up again several weeks later when there is a series coming out that you really want to watch. So that is a big problem. They've made, in the kind of bid to make everything more convenient, they've made it much more convenient to kill themselves.
This is my last question for you. Do you think there will ever come a time where some enterprising company bundles up subscriptions to all these various streaming platforms and then perhaps sells it to the consumer as a package for a total amount of money? And, they can buy the subscriptions in bulk from the big companies and then offer them to the consumers by if you subscribe to Netflix and Crave and Disney Plus, you'll get $15 off your bill.
I mean, we're seeing that streaming bundle happening in the United States right now.
Really?
That is totally happening right now. So yeah, it's
that really is cable TV.
That is cable TV by any other definition. So if it's happening down there, it's only a matter of time before us slowpokes in Canada get the message.
That's Barry Hertz, the deputy arts editor and film editor of the Globe and Mail. Now, it was great to hear from Barry about how and why this became such a big problem and what's likely to happen eventually, but not yet. Okay, well, maybe great's not the right word, but it's giving me the motivation to get this habit under control myself. Before we get to what I've done here, which is what a financial expert would recommend you do, take an audit of every service you subscribe to, track how often you use it, and cut the ones you don't use, we decided to see if we could find some tips from people who are better at cutting through the subscription jungle than I clearly am. So, we've got a few of those that you and I might want to consider.
We only have 2 streaming services at any given time. So we have a sports one that we always have, and then another one which is for TV or movies. And if somebody wants a different one, if my son wants this one or me or my wife want another one, then we have to drop the one we already have. It's a one in, one out system because otherwise it gets so expensive and it ends up being more expensive than cable used to be. And since the services allow you to sort of be very a la carte, you can just drop it and then come back a month later or 2 months later and there's no punishment or extra cost. We do it. So what we do is we try to burn through whatever it is we're watching on the service that we have. And when we're done, then we move on to another one for something specific that we want to see. And when we're done with that one, we cancel it and move on to another service.
Honestly, my hot tip is, not to sound like my mother, to use the library because they have so many resources. I'm truly quoting my actual mother. But shout out to the Libby app. Shout out to Canopy. So much good stuff. Great selection. User-friendly. Can't say enough good stuff.
So what my loved ones and I have created is almost like a network of shared family plans. So each one of us will purchase 1 or 2 streaming services, but we'll pay for the family bundle and then give each other the logins or the seats. So that way we all have access to all of these services that we want to use without having to actually pay for it. So for example, my wife and I pay for Spotify Premium and Amazon Prime. Meanwhile, my sister-in-law pays for YouTube Premium and Hulu. My brother pays for Disney Plus. My friend pays for for Netflix. My other friend pays for Crunchyroll. And then another friend also pays for Nintendo Online. And so then what we do is we like put each other on each other's accounts. And then that way you've got this wide range of like streaming services and like game passes, etc., without actually paying for it. And it's worked out beautifully.
Some excellent wisdom from my colleagues in the hopes of getting my subscription habits under control. As for my problem, I have done something about it. I'll tell you how. I needed to see just how bad it was first. So I dug deep into my past 6 months of receipts, and I totaled up all the recurring media subscriptions that I could find. So for these purposes, I'm not counting things like cloud storage or digital tools. I'm just counting media, so things I'm watching or reading or listening to or playing. I won't list everything here, mostly because I'm embarrassed, but it came to 19 monthly or yearly subscriptions, which I obviously prorated at their monthly rate, totaling $230 every month. I'm not counting here our basic cable subscription because it's part of our utilities package, but I am counting, for instance, the $15 per month we pay for HBO, or the $20 per month I pay for the premium sports channels. $230 is a staggering amount. So I spent the past couple of weeks, including 1 week of full-on vacation, tracking just how many of these services that I actually engaged with regularly. I would highly recommend you do this too. Sure, a digital subscription to a publication that you like might only be $5 or $6 a month, but if you're only using it every few weeks, you're probably okay with the 3 or 5 free articles you get before you hit the paywall. When you track it like this, you get a sense of the value you're getting in return. So when I tracked my usage, it became clear there were a few, easy cuts. So simple I'd been throwing money away. I hadn't read a comic book, for instance, on my iPad subscription service in months. Now it's gone. I honestly forgot for a few months there that I was a Washington Post subscriber, so that's going too. I'll live with the 5 free articles. I only need 1 subscription video game service since I don't even have a lot of time to play video games right now, so one of those can go as well. And there were a handful of subscriptions, like one to a premium football analytics website that I can certainly cut when the sport is in an off-season, and then I'll reevaluate later. So all told, my new monthly bill should be about $50 less, starting immediately. And if I continue to track which subscriptions I'm really using and which ones I simply don't, and I pay attention to all those notices I get about monthly renewals and really consider if I need that service, I bet that number will come down further. I'll leave you with one last tip that I've learned previously from canceling some of my many digital subscriptions. It won't work with the big, powerful streaming services, but many digital publications will, when you call them and tell them you're canceling because you can't afford it, offer you a discount for the next several months. You can do with that information what you will, whether you're really planning to cancel or just trying to shave a few bucks off the bill. Thank you so much, obviously, to Barry Hertz from the Globe and Mail for sharing his insight with us this week, and thanks to my colleagues for being more savvy about their subscription services than I clearly am. I have much to learn, but at least I'm starting. And thanks to you, as always, for tuning into this show. If you have a money problem, you know that we want to hear from you. You can call us at 416-935-5935. You don't need to give us your real name. If you do want to appear on this show, though, you need to leave an email address or a phone number where we can get a hold of you. The address is hello@itepod.ca. Explain your problem in as much detail as you feel comfortable with, and again, make sure we can get in touch with you. Watch for our email in return. You can also find us on social media if you're so inclined. We're on Instagram and TikTok at InThisEconomyPod. If you like this show and you want more of them, you got to share this with your friends, with your enemies, and tell them to listen and get help with their own finances. You can also rate, review, follow, like, whatever's available in the podcast app of your choice. I'm your host and your executive producer, Jordan Heath Rawlings. This episode was written and produced by Allison Broverman and Stephanie Phillips. The sound design was done by Ryan Clark. Mary Jubrin is our digital editor. Diana Kay is our manager of business development. Together, we're the Frequency Podcast Network, a division of Rogers. Thanks again for listening. We'll talk to you soon on In This Economy.